Hey, it's Soul, bringing you the World of Warcraft, and today we're going to go over how I tanked the Tichondrius encounter in the Nighthold raid. For the record, this is the 5th boss that my team killed after Spellblade Alluriel, and I've got to say that this was a challenging but really fun fight. So let's go over it and go through the talents that I used. I used Blessed Hammer, First Avenger, Blinding Light, Blessing of Spell Warding, Hand of the Protector, Judgment of Light, and Last Defender. But you could go for Seraphim too. Overall, the fight isn't terribly demanding from a mitigation standpoint. I mostly found myself supporting the team either through using my supporting abilities or just by trying to do a little bit more damage. Our main role is to handle the tank swap that happens due to Feast of Blood. Feast of Blood is cast on the current tank, and they have to tank the bloods 30 yards away from the boss. Otherwise, the ads won't die based on the vampiric aura that the boss projects onto them. And unless you have really ridiculous burst DPS, you want to drag these ads outside. Just so you know in advance, to make sure that we met the enrage timer, we didn't have any melee follow the tanks out, we just had ranged DPS focus the ads down. The exception was later in the fight when we needed help downing additional ads, and I'll get to that later. Basically, you want to time it so that you drag the ads out and kill it just before you need to go back in and re-swap. Killing the ads too late will cause an overlap, making you fall behind. Killing the ads too early, especially if you have melee DPS involved, will result in lost DPS to the boss. So do your best to coordinate with the raid so that way swaps occur with as few melee as possible, hopefully none if you can. Regardless of your exact positioning, you want to position yourself in such a way that you're not going to get hit by a Seeker Swarm. Random people on your team are going to be afflicted with a debuff called Carrion Plague. Those who are going to be targeted by Seeker Swarm. Instruct your team to make sure that anyone with Carrion Plague isn't in the way of each other. Seeker Swarm attacks in a straight line and it will hit anyone in the way, as well as behind them. So we have a raid positioned in a way that tanks are very unlikely to get hit by Seeker Swarm unless things get super chaotic. The boss himself doesn't do a lot of direct damage, but you want to keep an eye out for Brand of Argus, which is something that everyone else has to handle. Brand of Argus is that big ass circle that you see on the screen. Branded people need to move on a quote unquote clump of their allies, which for us was 4, including the branded target. This causes a raid-wide explosion, and the damage that you take depends on where the explosion took place. Most of the time explosions are going to happen away from the melee. Sometimes they don't though, so be aware of a brand running towards you while you're maybe taking a big hit. These abilities that I talked about happen throughout the encounter. They're a big pain in the butt, but for the most part you can handle it without having to use a major cooldown. Echoes of the Void is an ability that comes from the boss. All players are going to take significant damage unless they hide behind a convenient pillar that happens to appear. Hide behind them, but keep a couple things in mind. One is that you don't want too many people hiding behind a single pillar. The pillar itself has a set number of life and otherwise the amount of shadow damage that it can absorb. If too many players are standing behind a particular pillar, the pillar's gonna break, and that's gonna result on whatever remaining shadow damage to go on that team. The pillar location is also kind of random. It can spawn almost on top of the boss too, so do your best to have a pillar between you and him. Finally, as a protection pally, this is one of your opportunities to help support your team. At least from my observations, there were people taking some damage. So I helped out in a number of ways, including using Blessing of Sacrifice, Blessing of Spell Warding, and even my Hand of the Protector. The amount of rage healing during this fight is extensive, so anything that you can do to help out your team would be very much appreciated. At 2 points in the fight, all players are going to be stuck in this thing called Illusionary Night. Bats are going to appear, so do your best to pick as many up as you can and try to AoE them down. When they die, purple stuff appears and that'll give you a DPS buff that'll carry 30 seconds after this phase ends. Green stuff will also appear, followed by a big laser. Don't get hit by that, otherwise you're going to take some damage and get stunned. Again, it's important to pick up the bats and help your DPS bring these down. The DPS and mana regeneration buff that players will get will be pretty essential in order to get you guys through this fight if this is your first time through. Once you come out of this, the sequence repeats itself, but with a few more additions. After the first Illusionary Night, Fellsworn Spell Guards are going to appear at set intervals. If you have hunters, instruct them to misdirect these ads over to the tank that's going to run out. Again, you don't want to tank any ads within 30 yards of the boss due to the vampiric aura. These guys come out in pairs and apply a stacking debuff called Volatile Wound. This attack hurts, but what's more painful is what happens when the debuff wears off. When it does, you leave a nether zone, a purple cloud poop thing, and this could potentially be disruptive for you or the raid depending on where you lay this down. If you're able to, try to poop this thing out away from the raid. Otherwise, if you do need to pick the boss back up and you still have the debuff, you're gonna have to get out of the way as soon as that thing goes down. Advise your melee to watch out for that stuff. And if you do end up having to move the boss, instruct the other tank to make sure, once again, that ads are being tanked 30 yards away. All abilities will continue until there's another Illusionary Night. Make sure as many players as possible get the bat buff before the end of this phase. Once you come out, pop Bloodlust and start burning the boss as hard as you can. When those Felsworn guys appear again, they're going to be joined by a Sightless Watcher. I'm not even going to talk about its abilities, I'm just going to say kill this thing first. Ideally, you should still be able to take these ads down without the help of melee. As said, you want to try maximizing your DPS and limit movement as much as possible. From there, all abilities will once again continue until the boss enrages and, well, kills everybody. Again, I found myself throughout this fight having to support the team as much as I could through the use of defensive cooldowns and heals. Incoming tank damage isn't all that much until the end of the fight. For example, in our first kill, which happens to be the footage in this video, we ended up having to tunnel the boss in order to meet the enrage timer. That left me to tank Bloods in front of the boss, and for Shaddix, the warrior tank over there, to tank a whole bunch of ads way off in the distance. But that's the fight. Again, it was a lot of fun, and hopefully this guide will help you guys out. As always, if you like what you see, hit a like and share this video. And of course, if you're enjoying the content, please hit a sub to support this channel. You guys have a good one, and I'll see you at the next boss. I'm Soul. Stay breezy, guys.